Hey there, it's Rachel Mullins, the host of Hashtag No Filter Fridays on Public House Media.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row.
Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network.
Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimall.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Press Row. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn, filling in for Christian Heimall. If you are a long-time listener to the program, you're probably asking yourself, why in the world is Christian not here and who the heck is Baxter? Well, long story short, I'm the guy that runs Public House Media, but I'm also a sports broadcaster and journalist, just like Christian is. And Christian is not only a talented podcast host of Press Row and on the Cheap Seats, but he also has a terrific position inside the baseball world, and he is at some league meetings this week. So he asked me to fill in for him. So here I am. We've got a great show in store for you. I promise you I will try to do my best to live up to the hype of what Christian is and does on a weekly basis. Two wonderful guests coming up for you today. David Kenyon, a national staff writer for Bleacher Report, will stop by to talk about the NFL trade deadline. Le'Veon Bell, is he going to move? We've already seen some other players move. And then we're also going to be joined by Jessica McDonald. She is a attacking player for the North Carolina Courage in the NWSL. She's also the 2018 NWSL Finals MVP and a U.S. Women's National Team player. She's going to swing by the program to talk a little bit about the U.S. Women's National Team and their run towards the 2019 Women's World Cup. Of course, you can find the show by going to thephmedia.com/pressrow. You can find Press Row on all the social media platforms. And of course, wherever you find your podcasts, you're also going to find Press Row. Kicking the show off, let's talk a little bit about some of the headlines surrounding the sports world. First and foremost, the Boston Red Sox and the LA Dodgers. Game 1 of the World Series took place on Tuesday evening as it saw the Dodgers surprisingly, but yet not surprisingly, fall to the Red Sox. I wouldn't call it surprising in all honesty because this is the nature of the game. When you have a team as dominant as the Boston Red Sox come out and do exactly what we thought they were going to do and win game number 1, it was really no surprise. 8-4, that final score from game number 1. Game 2 currently going on while we're recording the show. Right now, Boston, at the time of this recording, is up 1-0. But looking back at this game, Clayton Kershaw, he takes the loss. He goes 4 innings, allows 5 runs, strikes out 5, walks 3. That's the big thing for me, at least when I look at this quick stat sheet, is Clayton Kershaw doesn't do too many things wrong. But when you walk 3 batters in a World Series, that's going to start to be a little bit of questioning. You look at Matt Barnes, he was the starter, he got the win, rather. 1 inning pitched, 1 strikeout. But Boston, 2 runs in the first, and then they continued to add across the game from there. The 1-1 in the third, 2 in the fifth, and 3 in the seventh to really put the game to bed. The Dodgers, they kept it alive, though. They did their best to keep this game interesting. I mean, this game was 8-4 in the seventh, and the Dodgers had 2 more chances to get a couple more runs, and unfortunately the offense just wasn't clicking for them at that time. Do I think that the Dodgers have enough in their system to beat the Red Sox in at least one game? Absolutely. I think that you'll see Boston ultimately end up taking the series in 5 games, but I think the Dodgers are going to do their very best to try to make some sort of possible something. They're going to try to make this a series, but the fact that the Dodgers struggled against the Brewers, and the Brewers are by no means nearly as talented as what obviously the Red Sox are, that's going to make for an interesting series here as you look at a team like the Red Sox that's just stacked beyond belief. And I don't want to get into the debate here right now about saying, well, it was 2 major markets. I've seen so many different things come out about the fact that, oh, well, the MLB rigged it. They didn't want the Brewers to have to play against the Red Sox because no one's going to care that it's the Brewers and the Red Sox, and the Brewers would have gotten swept. I don't think the Brewers would have gotten swept personally. That's not because I'm based here in Wisconsin. That's just purely because that you look at what Milwaukee has done all season. You look how they went from 0 to hero. And suddenly they're this force to be reckoned with, and you've got a group of players that are excited to come to work every day. That's step one when you have a successful team, and if you want to build a successful team, you need players that are going to want to show up each and every day to go to work. And that's what Milwaukee's finally done, and it's good to see that they're starting to get that rebuild. Milwaukee, I expect to see them in the playoffs again next year, but right now as far as the World Series, Boston, you've got my heart, you've got my pick to win this, and I know that would make Christian happy also. And truthfully, it would take a miracle for the Dodgers to win the pennant at this point. If you want the Dodgers to win the World Series, I would be very intrigued to hear from you. However, like I said, I strongly, strongly believe that this is the Red Sox World Series to lose. Other notable headlines around the sports world. We're going to talk about this deeper with David Kenyon, but Amari Cooper getting traded for a first-round draft pick to the Dallas Cowboys. Are you kidding me? Where in the world does it say that Amari Cooper is valued that high based on the poor amount of production that he has had the last couple of years? And when did it also get written on the wall that the Raiders are basically shopping everybody? I'm curious to know who is going to be left with the most players after the trade deadline. Is it going to be the Giants or is it going to be the Raiders? Because both teams basically have their locker rooms wide open, and teams are coming in saying, yeah, I'll take this guy, I'll take 2 of you, I'll take a draft pick, I'll take that. It's really open market right now on the East and West Coast if you're trying to get new players onto your team. Speaking of which, with the Giants, Eli Apple, he's been shipped off to the New Orleans Saints. This is a terrific move for the Saints because it allows them to continue to make that push towards that next level of a playoff run. We saw how close they were last year. They were a missed tackle away from going to the NFC Championship game when Stephon Diggs pulled off that absolutely insane Minnesota Miracle. Does Eli Apple solve the problems for the Saints? I definitely think he is a key cog in that defense now. He's going to be a high-profile athlete, and David Kenyon, when he joins us a little bit, well, I'm sure we'll have more to speak on that. The other big thing, and I can't help but laugh when I read this and I look at this, the Lakers are 0-3 right now at the time of this recording in the NBA, and LeBron James has not started 0-3 since before I was in middle school. I was in maybe in elementary school. It was the early 2000s is the last time any team LeBron James has been a part of started 0-3. Now, as interesting as that storyline is, what is even more interesting is that Kobe Bryant was on Jimmy Kimmel Live very recently, and he, this is the part that makes me laugh, he came out and said, if the Lakers go 0-5, I'll consider a comeback. Obviously, you and I both know that that's not going to happen. Kobe's fine. Kobe's not going to come out of retirement just to try to help salvage the Lakers' name. However, if you are the Lakers and you say, Kobe, come back for one season, imagine what it would be to have Kobe Bryant and LeBron James on the same court. I'm a football soccer guy. On the same court, running LA together. I would struggle to say who would be in charge, though. Do you have the King and LeBron running, or do you have the Black Mamba in Kobe running that team if Kobe comes back? Sure is not Lonzo, that's for sure. Or literally anybody else that continues to walk out on the court. Rajon Rondo's busy getting into fights, and it's not a good situation for the Lakers right now. But we've seen this countless times before with any team that LeBron James is on. It doesn't matter if you lose the first 12 games of the year, or if you're down 3-1 in a series. LeBron is going to find a way to make this team a contender. They may make the playoffs, and if they do, watch out, because we all know that's when LeBron James shines the brightest. When we come back, David Kenyon of Bleacher Report will be joining the program for the very first time as we dive into what's taking place inside the NFL, the trade deadline, Carlos Hyde, Patrick Peterson, Le'Veon Bell, Amari Cooper, the list goes on and on. Who's going where, why are they moving, and who might be the next person to move? That's all coming up when we return on Press Row, presented by Public House Media.
This is Dr. Mariah White, host of Your Life Matters, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Your Life Matters, where we talk about dreaming big and dreaming bold to reach your wildest dreams in both your health and your happiness. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Your Life Matters. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Back inside Press Row here on Public House Media. I'm Baxter, filling in for Christian Heimall. As Christian always does, he loves to have different journalists from around the sports world covering the topics that are hot and are somewhat controversial at times, but thankfully we might stray away from that second part. The guest joining us on the line today is a national staff writer for Bleacher Report. It's David Kenyon here to talk about all the crazy and downright surprising, at least in my opinion, NFL trade deadline deals so far. David, welcome to the program, sir. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, David. Let's jump right into it. Some big moves happening here in just the last couple of days. But first and foremost, I got to ask, did the Amari Cooper or the Eli Apple trade surprise you more? Because when I woke up and saw these deals had taken place, both kind of surprised me. But when you saw this as someone that covers the NFL, that covers the sports world as a whole, did one of them really kind of hit you more, being like, wow, really? I can't believe that actually happened?
I wasn't surprised necessarily that either happened. Amari Cooper has kind of not exactly lived up to the hype of his college production, his draft slot, any of that. Eli Apple, too, there was some problems in the locker room that were reported last year that even if they were resolved, there's kind of that hangover effect that never really goes away. I would say, though, that the return for Amari Cooper was shocking to me.
Yes.
A first-round pick for him, that was entirely unexpected.
What would you think is a fair market value for a guy like that? A third, a second?
Well, there's one thing that I hear a lot, and it's very important to remember, is the market is what happened.
Right.
So it was a first-round pick. However, it just feels like the Cowboys were bidding against themselves there. I'm not sure who else would have paid a first-rounder. I guess if there was a second, that's the move you had to take, and maybe there was.
Mm-hmm.
But I was surprised it wasn't a second-rounder. I would have expected that. I didn't think it'd be lower because if you think about like the 2019 draft class of wide receivers,
right?
Cooper's probably better than a whole lot of them, even though he hasn't really been that good lately. So you can compare it to that, and it makes sense. You can get the justification there. But certainly a first-rounder is not something I anticipated would happen.
Right, and I think one of the things that I've seen people talk about further has been the fact that the Patriots used a fifth-rounder for Josh Gordon, and some folks are kind of playing the comparison of Cooper to Gordon, but I know it's a little difficult because the sample size of Gordon's been skewed the last couple of years, but I mean, if you're looking now in hindsight, looking at both of those deals, did the Patriots get the better deal, or did the Cowboys?
Oh, I think the Patriots got a better deal for sure because the hit rate of a fifth-round pick, I believe it was, the hit rate of a fifth-round pick is low.
Yes.
The first-rounder, I mean, that's how you ruin a franchise, is you mess up first-round picks.
Yes, yep. And that makes complete sense to me.
Like you were saying, the situation was different and context always matter. You can't look at every deal in a vacuum and expect everything to work out the same way. I understand why the Cowboys did it. They sorely need a potential number one receiver. Whether or not Cooper is that, I mean, that's another discussion entirely. Does he have the potential? Sure. And that's what you're banking on. And Gordon, well, he's a reclamation project, super talented, and if he finds his way in New England, as I hope he does, that's an awesome trade for New England then. But I would say comparing them is a little unfair just because of the context with Gordon's situation.
Sticking on the East Coast, since you were just kind of talking about Josh Gordon there, Le'Veon Bell, still nothing official out about him. What do you think is going to happen? I've seen a lot of rumors pop out about he might be a Packer, which I know is not going to happen. I've seen other teams pop up as well. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, the transfer, the deadline is the 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern. I mean, he's got, the Steelers have a little bit of time to move him, but does anybody really want to deal with that?
I think the Steelers would be willing to move him, but they can't actually trade him until he signs the franchise tender, which hasn't happened. So technically the Steelers do not own Le'Veon Bell right now, beyond the fact that if he's playing or if he's signing a contract, it has to be with Pittsburgh. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think the latest rumor of him holding out until after the trade deadline is going to be what happens.
Agreed.
He has to report by week 10 to make this season count toward his free agency. Otherwise, he'd be a restricted free agent this summer, and that's not what he wants to do. So I would be willing to put any friendly wager down that he reports by week 10 so that he can be an unrestricted free agent this summer and finally sign that big contract that he's been looking for.
With the way that James Conner's been playing, would you play Le'Veon Bell if he were to come back as a Steeler?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't see a guy go from 400 touches to 0 because, well, we just decided he's not effective. He's not getting touches because he's not playing. I mean, do you start him? I guess that's a big label that doesn't really matter.
That's true.
Because James Conner, okay, if he takes the first snap, that means he's the starter. But when Bell is in game shape, does that mean that they're going to give more touches to Conner? Probably not. But if Bell comes back and gets the first touch of the game, he's not going to be in game shape. He might get 10, 12 touches in that first appearance, but Conner's still going to get 15. So I would say starter is an overrated label. Will he be a significant factor? Yes. Has Conner proved that he deserves touches too? Yes.
One of the things that surprised me about recent news is that Patrick Peterson is trying to get out of Arizona. I mean, it's not surprising when you look at how poor the Cardinals have played this year. Peterson himself has come out saying he wants to go to the Saints. The Eagles are also a rumored destination. Where do you take this with such a high-profile player like Patrick Peterson?
I would say that it's extremely unlikely that something happens here for many reasons. First of all, like literally within the last couple minutes, he said, I'm comfortable in Arizona. So I don't anticipate there's going to be any pressure from him moving forward. I would just say it would have been really hard for anybody to make that deal. The Saints make a whole lot of sense. After trading for Eli Apple, it's not as imperative. But the Saints have traded their first, third, and fourth round picks in the upcoming draft, which is not a problem. It just means that they don't have the draft capital to entice Arizona, because if you're trading Patrick Peterson, you're probably talking about 2 first-round picks. This is a guy who fits in any defensive system. He's a lockdown guy in man coverage. He's excellent in zone. You're paying for one of the best corners in the game. And if Amari Cooper is getting first-round pick, and again, like I said, nothing's in a vacuum, so you can't go or nothing is apples to apples in the NFL. But if that's the kind of value that Amari Cooper fetches, I mean, Patrick Peterson, you'd think, would be a first and a second, a first and a first. The Eagles have that. They have a first-rounder and 2 second-rounders this year, so that's possible. But, man, I'm not sure the Eagles really want to go all in on this year.
Right, and after winning it last year.
Well, yeah, and they're just in a little bit of trouble this year that you can't even guarantee that the Eagles are going to be in the playoffs. Do I think they will? Yeah. But, man, it's not a guarantee.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to go in on one player just to think, well, we might make it. So I can understand what you're saying. One other move that surprised me as we're talking with David Kenyon from Bleacher Report, I was really surprised by the Carlos Hyde trade because this could be me living in my NFC vacuum, but I thought Cleveland was in the mood for a good beat-em-up running back, and I thought Hyde was a good fit for them. And then all of a sudden we see him shipped off to Jacksonville, who obviously is in desperate need of some running backs right now with a lot of injuries plaguing their guys down there.
Yeah, I didn't expect it, but I think it's a good move for Cleveland. Nick Chubb, when they drafted him, he had all the signs of being that featured back. He carried the load in Georgia, had a really bad knee injury, but came back and was extremely productive. So I really like him, and I think that the Browns needed to commit to him moving forward as the featured guy, and Hyde obviously was going to take a fair share of those carries. But I think the bigger concern was the Browns just gave an extension to Duke Johnson, and through 7 games this year, he has 38 touches.
Wow.
I don't know how you pay a guy $5 million a year and give him 5 touches a game. And that's just foolish if we're being completely honest.
Agreed.
And he's a much larger receiving threat than Carlos Hyde. Hyde's fine, but Duke Johnson is better in that regard. Chubb can be your workhorse on first and second down. He can provide some third down contributions too, because Johnson's versatility allows him to play in the slot when needed too. So you can have both of those players on the field very often,
yes,
and they're not taking reps from each other. But Hyde just kind of took snaps, and he was productive in those, but he's not a piece of your future going forward. So getting value for him at his peak after a couple good games, smart, very smart. And obviously, like you said, Jacksonville in desperate need of running backs, and I think trading for Hyde shows that they're a little bit more concerned about Leonard Fournette than we probably would like to think.
Right, and I would agree with that also. I mean, on paper now, you look at those 3 running backs that Jacksonville has with Yedlin and Hyde and Fournette, and I mean, those are 3 very prominent backs when they're healthy. However, like you said, they're a little concerned about the longevity of where they might be with some of those other guys, and hence why Hyde is there. So I'm excited for Carlos Hyde. I mean, he is a guy that played high school football the exact same time I was playing, and he was a lot of fun. Thank God I never had to play against him, but he was a fun player to go and watch when my team had a bye week or whatnot. But excited to see him back in the state of Florida and see what he can do, and have some good supporters coming up from the Naples area as well. So excited for Carlos for that. Before we let you go, David, I have to ask you, is there any other predictions that you are kind of hoping either happen or maybe don't happen, since we still have a couple of days until the deadline hits back on the 30th?
I would say there's nothing that I'm hoping that happens necessarily, other than I'd like to see Le'Veon Bell back on the football field. Trade-wise, I think you just start looking at what teams are bad and see who they're willing to trade and who they're able to trade, because midseason NFL trades are very complicated. It's not like picking up a system is just second nature. Some of them can do it very easily, but some of them, that's extremely complicated. And it might take 2 or 3 weeks for them to really assimilate to that new team. And man, week 10 and 11, you pretty much know whether your team's a playoff contender or not. There's not a whole lot of surprises at that point. So I'd say keep an eye out on the Giants with Landon Collins and Janoris Jenkins. Really, they could take apart that secondary and try again next year. Dave Gettleman seems to enjoy late-round picks for whatever reason, so that might be a market inefficiency you can take advantage of to get a really good player. The Broncos, Raiders, Cardinals, 49ers, they all kind of stand out as potential trade teams. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of stars available, and I don't anticipate major moves, but the NFL trade deadline is definitely more active than it has been in previous years, and it's really a whole lot of fun to watch.
Good stuff, David. I appreciate it. If folks want to keep up with your writing or follow you on social media, what's the best way for them to do so?
All my work is found on Bleacher Report, and then also you can follow me on Twitter at Kenyon19_BR. That's Kenyon 19_BR.
David Kenyon, always a pleasure, sir, the national staff writer for Bleacher Report. Thank you, David. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me on.
Coming up, we will have the reigning NWSL MVP of the NWSL Championship, Jess McDonald, on to talk about what is going on with the U.S. Women's National Team ahead of their 2019 Women's World Cup. It's a lot of excitement budding around that team, and we're excited to see what Jess has to say, not only from a player's perspective, but also from someone that has a very good eye on what's taking place in the women's soccer landscape. It's all coming up on Press Row here, presented by Public House Media.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast-Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Press Row, presented by Public House Media. I'm Baxter Colburn, sitting in for Christian Heimall. We just had a great conversation with Bleacher Report's national staff writer David Kenyon, talking about what is taking place in the free agent market for the NFL. We're going to go from football to football and chat with a woman that has made an incredible name for herself just in the last couple of months. She is a forward for the North Carolina Courage in the NWSL. She is a 2018 NWSL Championship Game MVP, and she's an awesome person, first and foremost. She's a good friend, but also someone that I have a huge amount of respect for. It's Jessica McDonald, and she's here on Press Row now to chat about the U.S. Women's National Team. Hello, Jess. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so pumped to talk soccer, always.
I knew you would be, so that's why I knew this was going to be a good interview. I'm like, talking soccer with Jess? Oh, this is going to be too easy. I love it.
Exactly, yes.
Well, first and foremost, Jess, I have to ask, why in the world does it seem like the U.S. Women's National Team is just completely unstoppable right now? What is the secret? What is Jill Ellis doing for these ladies that makes them seem that they're just completely invincible right now?
Yeah, so far, I have to commend Jill Ellis for putting a squad like this together, simply because I know it's been a process for her. She's been tweaking some things, putting people in uncomfortable positions where she's confident that they'd be really good at. So I think just her putting the squad together up until this point in comparison to the last few years after the last World Cup and Olympics, she's definitely made a remarkable change for this team. And since she's been doing that for this entire year, they've been very dominant just because she's putting the key pieces together. They're unstoppable. They haven't had too much of a challenge so far, but I think leading up to the World Cup, just because they're kind of sweeping through teams right now and not being as challenged as they would throughout the World Cup, at least they're in the middle of gaining confidence. And confidence is really good for any kind of team, and that's just where they're at right now. They're confident, and they're just pushing forward, and they're doing what they have to do in order to succeed game in and game out.
And I completely agree with that. That's a big part about right now, too, and that's one of the questions we're going to get to in a moment, is about talking about the level of opponents that they're dealing with. But you talk about dominance, and you talk about just completely running through teams. You're basically describing Alex Morgan's form right now. I don't remember ever seeing her play at such a high level, but you're the one that has to deal with her on the field and obviously knows her personally. Is this the best that you've ever seen Alex Morgan play in the time that you've seen her active in her career?
Definitely. And it just shows you that age really does not matter when it comes to female athletes.
Mm-hmm.
She's pushing 30. I think she's 29 right now, and she's peaking right now.
Yes.
And I think it's because of, I know her diet has changed. She's been really strict with her diet. Training-wise, she's been in and out of injury for the past few years, and she's getting over that. And, a lot of times, sometimes athletes have to go through these injuries and be able to become a better athlete. It happens with a lot of athletes. They have surgery, they have all these injuries, but then they bounce back and then they just dominate because they're doing a different type of training and disciplining their body in a way that they didn't before their injury. So I think after her learning from everything from her ankle injuries and everything else that she has gone through, it's done nothing but motivate her in such a positive way. And at the end of the day, it's very inspiring. So just like with the entire team, Alex Morgan is also gaining that confidence as well. I mean, 22 goals in 22 games, I think it is. It doesn't get any better than that. And the only way that she can move is forward and up. And I think that's what she's doing. Now that she's on her front foot, she's on her toes right now. And obviously this is just something that she wants. This is what she's worked very hard for. And it's absolutely amazing to be able to witness.
And I would agree with you on that also, knowing the fact that she has done so much to come back from those injuries. And it's interesting because, like you mentioned, her stats of scoring so many goals in these last couple of games. You and I obviously understand this because we follow the game of soccer so closely, but for those people that maybe don't know so much about soccer, and this public perception of the U.S. women's national team right now, I feel like is skewed based on the weak regional opponents that they have to deal with. Do you feel like in your circles or what you've seen nationally, that's kind of the case where it's like, well, yeah, of course they're supposed to, blow through all these teams. And even when folks were making the argument that the U.S. women's, when they went and beat Trinidad and Tobago, like, oh, that's revenge for them, for the men losing. I'm like, it's not even at all the same. It's totally night and different. But where do you sit on that? How do you feel like the public perception is of the women's national team because of the weaker opponents they're dealing with, because they don't have to deal with the Swedens and the Germanys and Japans until World Cup play usually?
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with you. We know the game so well, and I think the outside world who doesn't know the game in depth the way we do, they just don't understand. And people kind of hate what they don't understand. So at the end of the day, I think people fail to realize that the U.S. women's national team has absolutely nothing to do with the men's national team. It just so happened that they ended up playing in the CONCACAF tournament against each other, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the men's team. And them sweeping through Trinidad and Tobago, it just shows that TNT just hasn't caught up in women's soccer yet. And that goes for all the other countries that the U.S. played against in the CONCACAF tournament. And it's not the U.S.'s fault that they haven't been fully challenged in these games. It just so happened that these games were scheduled for them, and it's not in the players' hands. They go into these games, they do their job, and just because they've been sweeping through these teams, it's doing nothing but gaining confidence for them, like I said before. And it's just the beginning of everything right now, leading into the World Cup. So yeah, they're going to be challenged a little bit more come the World Cup, and it's going to be very exciting to see. But since they're so confident right now, it's going to be very interesting to see how other teams adjust to the way the U.S. women's national team has been playing. So for me, in my eyes, U.S. right now is number one. They're dominating no matter who they've played so far, whether if it's a lower tier team or a high tier team. I mean, they're just completely dominant right now, and it's a very tough thing to stop a very dominant team, because since they've been sweeping through these teams right now, think about it. If you are Germany, you're looking back, you're like, okay, they swept through these teams 6-0. How are we going to adjust our games to play against them? Whereas I'm pretty sure the U.S. national team doesn't need to do any adjustments for themselves going into these games. So it's going to be a really tough World Cup for the U.S., but at the same time, I think that they're going to be pretty dominant leading into the final at least, and then coming into the final, semifinal, and the final, which I'm very confident they'll make it to. Obviously, that's when they'll be challenged. But I think at the same time, these teams are going to have to adjust to what the women's national team is doing.
Well, and you talk about it, too, from the perspective that this team is just absolutely loaded with depth, and that's one thing that I always stand by, too, and saying, yes, they may have had some shaky results before Jill Ellis really started to put things together, but that's because she was tinkering so much with the lineup, but that's because she has the depth to do that and say, okay, yeah, we might not have Alex Morgan on the field, but oh, look, here is this laundry list of still incredibly talented forwards that can come out and still score a bunch of goals every game, yourself included. It's one of those things that many teams in any sport would kill to have the amount of depth that the U.S. women's national team has at their disposal. But are there any newer players, whether they're first-time call-ups or just younger players maybe that you've seen kind of start to come through the system that you're excited and hopeful that they're either on the World Cup roster or they get at least some time in these upcoming friendlies?
Yeah, most certainly. I'm just so excited to see Rose Lavelle, 100%, finally. The girl is, she's on her tiptoes right now. She's absolutely crushing it. Her, like I said with Alex Morgan, coming back from an injury, a lot of times players come back even better. And I see a huge improvement with Rose Lavelle, and it's so exciting to watch the girl play. She's so good on the ball. Her left foot is dominant. She can easily finish the ball top of the 18, even a 30-yarder. You saw her finish against Canada.
Yes.
It's just really cool to see her playing at 100% finally. And I just definitely have to say that she's definitely one of the faces for the future of the U.S. Women's national team. And I believe she makes such a huge difference for this team simply because she brings speed, she brings skill, she brings things that you couldn't ask more for. And I would definitely say Abby Dahlkemper as well. Such an incredible center back. I know she's my teammate, but it's been an amazing journey for me to watch her develop as a center back. And I know it's not the easiest. It's a simple position, but she brings so much more to the game. She can break lines. She can play a long ball. She can play a diagonal ball. She can win 50-50 headers. She's so aggressive, and it's just amazing to see her develop into the center back that she is now. And, I would definitely have to say those are two of my favorite players on the team. And Lindsey Horan, wow. I mean, she's been an absolute incredible player to watch. I'm definitely a huge fan of hers. To see her dominate on the field, getting back as a holding midfielder, and also getting forward as a holding midfielder. Mm-hmm. The girl can finish. The girl can defend. She's very skillful on the ball. She's very good at switching the point of attack. A midfielder like that, you literally could not ask for anything more than what Lindsey Horan brings to the table.
And I completely agree with you on that. Watching some of the more recent highlights of Horan it's amazing to see just how dominant and how confident she is on the ball. Also, sometimes people talk about, you just need to be able to have good vision, or you need to be able to connect the passes. Well, those are all great, but if you don't have confidence when you've got the ball at your foot, none of that other stuff matters. It doesn't matter how talented you are. So her and Rose and Abby all exude confidence, and I've had the pleasure to interview Abby and Rose before, and just outstanding women just to be able to speak with, but also you talk about that level of talent that they bring to the field. And they're both still very young, and that's just a small sample size of what the U.S. Women's national team has moving forward, which I think is so encouraging for the longevity of their continued dominance, but also just the success of the women's soccer programs throughout the country. And I know there's still a lot more and a deeper conversation that can be had, of course, but at the same time, across the board, from what you can see and what you can say, it's something to be proud of for right now.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Well, good. Well, Jess, I appreciate you taking time today. Of course, you've got a busy off season right now, and when does training camp open for the Courage? You still got a couple months, right?
Yeah, preseason isn't until March 3rd.
Okay, so you got some time to relax on the beach, right? Because that's exactly what you do, is just sit around and relax in the off season.
Off season? There is no off season.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right answer. Jess, always a pleasure. I appreciate the time, and best of luck on your career moving forward. Maybe we'll see you wearing a red, white, and blue jersey here in the next couple months.
Most certainly. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. There goes NWSL Championship MVP Jessica McDonald. Great to speak with her. Just an amazing player to watch, but also just a fun person to be able to have the chance to interact with as well. So always a pleasure. We are going to wrap things up when we come back. We are going to be diving into your listener questions. There's a doozy of questions this week. We've got everything from soccer to cricket to football to, I think there's a baseball question in there too. You guys have completely outdone yourself this week with the questions. I'm just trying to fill in for Christian and do the best I can for him, so I'll have to brush up on my cricket knowledge to answer one of those fan questions when we come back. It's all coming up on Press Row, presented by Public House Media. Don't go anywhere.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimall, a Public House Media podcast.
Back inside Press Row, presented by Public House Media. I'm Baxter Colburn, filling in for Christian Heimall. Thanks for joining the program this week. Last part of the program, as we wrap things up, has to do with your listener questions. And let me say, I've heard Christian do this segment many times since the beginning, and I'm not sure if there's ever been such a diverse cast of questions that have ever been asked, honestly, I put the post on my social media, and I asked the question. I said, what are your biggest questions about the sports world right now? Hashtag Press Row Podcast. And oh my goodness, the questions that have rolled in, the thoughts that have rolled in from people are truly surprising. I'm not going to answer all the questions, but I want to hit on a couple of them. David asked the question. He said, when will soccer take over in the U.S.? It's on its way up and the NFL is losing some popularity. The short answer for that, David, because this is a long discussion, soccer, as long as the NFL is a active league, the world of soccer, as in MLS, will never overtake it. As soon as we start to see a hard drop-off where either teams are dropping off or fan bases are leaving in droves, then you will see MLS start to grow. Or when you start to see more major corporations and even other professional leagues start to really recognize and put a lot more scope on what exactly MLS is doing, then you might see that rise. Women's soccer in the United States is very popular, but it's very popular within a small niche, unfortunately. Women's soccer is going to take an even longer time to grow. The women's national team is at a different level than the men's national team, and it shows as they continue to play at such a high level because they have so much talent. So this is unfortunately not going to be something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be a while, but at the same time, it's going to be at least another decade or so, in my opinion, minimum, until you start to see soccer really begin to overtake the NFL. Let's see here. Scott asked the question, whom do the Cubs pick up? Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, other? Whom do they part ways with? Chatwood, Wilson, Hayward, other? Scott, I'll be honest, I don't know much about the baseball world, but what I do know is that Bryce Harper and Manny Machado would make the Cubs an even more dangerous team than they already are. I like the storyline better of Manny Machado becoming a Cub because Brewers fans already hate him a lot, and why not make it more interesting and have him come and play inside the NL Central? That would make for a lot of fun. But Bryce Harper, I know, also needs to get a change of scenery because he truly is kind of wasting away and needs to get something figured out about his career. So I could see both, but I think from a storyline perspective, I'd love to see Machado in Chicago because that would add a whole nother layer to it. Let's see. Adam asked the question. He said, will the U.S. national team continue with their young European talent or become MLS again and try to boost the league popularity? Adam, the honest answer is that if the United States wants to compete in the World Cup and in any other major tournament and continue to demand respect across the entire gamut of international soccer, whoever the coach is, they need to find a good balance of both. However, I personally, since I am not so much pro MLS anymore, I do support MLS. I think that it's a growing, budding league. However, as far as young national team talent, you have to get as many European players in there as possible because look who continues to make big waves inside the Champions League. Look who continues to make big waves inside some of the bigger international leagues. It's the young U.S. national team players. MLS is a great opportunity for young players to get discovered by bigger leagues. It's a good opportunity for those homegrown United States boys that want to stay in the area and not leave their families. But the level of play is still going to take a long time in MLS to catch up to even Liga MX, which is our neighbor to the south, or even some of the secondary divisions in Europe. So the more European players, the more players we can send to Europe if you're the U.S. national team, the better. That will only help make the level of soccer that much better overall. Tim asked a great question I don't know the answer to, but I have to acknowledge it. He said, what country will win the International Cricket World Cup? The responses, I kind of let people take care of it themselves. Zach said not England. Bryce said Sri Lanka, all the way Zimbabwe and Scotland. Not making the field due to the smaller size is nonsense. Bryce, let's see. Simon also said, honestly, England have the best team and playing at home will be an advantage. However, World Cups throw all sorts and Pakistan would be his pick. Let's see. Zach also said England sucks, but they can't win. So it's going to be interesting. Let's see here. I don't know much about the Cricket World Cup, so apologies for that. Let's see here. Zach asks, why do TV rights holders for marquee events like the Europa League think that it is okay to only show the final on TV and not any of the qualifiers, the group stage, the playoffs on TV? This is What is this, the 1966 World Cup? Zach, this is hard because the Europa League is not and likely will not ever surpass the majestic overall infallibility of what the Champions League is. Europa is a great second place silver medal, bronze medal tournament, but it will never be the Champions League. Yes, I know you still have very high-quality teams that make it to the Europa League, that make it exciting to watch. I do think the TV providers should at least show some of the knockout rounds. You shouldn't wait until the final to show just that on TV, personally. You should at least show some of the playoff knockout round matches, in my personal opinion. But because it is their Europa League, I can see non-soccer fans and non-soccer networks looking at this and saying, well, we'll broadcast the final, but truthfully, we don't care about anything else because we're not making enough money, because a lot of these teams are either from smaller countries or are not as popular as the big teams which make it to the Champions League. Mike, going with another soccer question, he says the top 3 overrated footballers right now. A couple people in the comments were definitely getting after it. Neymar, Pogba, and Rooney came in from Simon. Scott was jumping in there and saying, don't you ever say a bad word about Pogba and Rooney. They were going after it a little bit about Scott being a United fan. Personally, top 3 overrated football players, Gareth Bale would be on my list. Neymar would be on my list. And unfortunately, we're kind of teetering into that conversation of Lionel Messi being a little bit overrated as well. You're really starting to see this emergence of how good can Messi still continue to be in this older age. But Gareth Bale and Neymar for sure are my top 2. Pogba, in my opinion, has never been an exceptionally talented player. I know he does make some good plays, and I'm obviously, it's good for him and good for France, obviously, and for the other clubs he's played for. But I've never been Team Pogba, so he would definitely fall into my list of an overrated player. Calling Wayne Rooney overrated, I think, is unfair. Personally, I think he's done a lot in his career, and he had some downward strife, and he will continue to get back up as he continues to move forward. Simon says, why are there so many cheeseheads at the UK NFL games? Hey, Packer fans are international, Simon. That's the reality of it. Simon says, more importantly, can the Chargers make the Super Bowl? Chargers got a good team this year, but they will not make the Super Bowl. They have too many teams that have to get through, including the Chiefs and the Patriots in the AFC. Let's see here. These other ones. Sarah says, why aren't the Brewers in the World Series? Well, Sarah, simple answer, they didn't win enough games, but more importantly, the Dodgers got a couple lucky breaks and the Brewers' bats went cold. A couple of wrestling questions. I'm not going to touch those because I have no clue. Danny wants to know which NFL team will Mike McCoy destroy next. The answer is there really one team that is safe from Mike McCoy? The answer is no. Karen asks a good question. She says, I'm curious as to why more people are not interested in UFC or other MMA. That's a good question because I'm not interested in UFC or MMA. I know people that are, but my response to that, my answer to that is pretty straightforward. I would have to say the big things is, number one, it's not easily accessible. You do have to pay for it. I know you can split it between other folks, and I know that you can obviously, knock the cost down like you're going to the movies. But it's not easily accessible, number one. Number two, it's an incredibly violent sport. I know some people like violence, but at the same time, what's the storyline? People like sports that involve balls. Baseball, they like seeing the big home runs. They like seeing the amazing goal. They like seeing the one-handed catch. They like seeing the deep three-pointer. It's very prehistoric of us to want to watch two people fight. That's why I think boxing has taken a huge decline. That's why I think the MMA and UFC world have such a small or a niche following, because people prefer in the sports world to watch something that's greater to do. And it's not to say that nobody can not get it, because you could easily make the argument, say anybody can get in a ring and fight. Well, right. Not everybody's going to win, obviously, because everyone's made differently and you have to have technique. And I know there's hours and hours and hours of training that go into it, but people are enthralled with a ball. People are enthralled with a puck. People are enthralled with the fact that you have to take this object and move it from one end of a field to another, or one side of the ice or court to the other. And it takes this extension of your body, of either with a stick or a racket, or you're using your hands to throw it to another player. It's a team sport. It's a totally different look at what a person can do with sports. So UFC and MMA is very dramatic, very drama-filled, and unfortunately not something that I feel will ever be as popular as any of the regular ball sports, I guess is the best way to put it. Love to hear your response to that, though, Karen, and anybody else. But that's my personal opinion of why I feel more people are not interested and don't continue to gravitate towards the world of UFC and MMA. That's all I've got time for questions. A huge thanks to everybody that took time to message in. Christian, of course, does a great job when he's on and answers folks' questions as well. So please, when he's back next week, send in all of your questions that you possibly can. A big thanks to David Kenyon for Bleacher Report for joining the program this week, and also to Jessica McDonald from the North Carolina Courage. She's the 2018 NWSL Finals MVP. I'm Baxter Colburn saying thank you so much for joining. Christian will be back next week. You can listen by subscribing to the podcast. Go to Apple Podcasts right now if you haven't listened to the show previously and you're just tuning in for the first time, or if you've been a long-time listener but hey, I always forget to subscribe. Go to Apple Podcasts and smash that subscribe button. And once you search for Press Row by Public House Media, you won't want to miss next week's episode. Christian always does a phenomenal job. We're proud to have him a part of Public House Media, and I'm honored that I had the opportunity to fill in and guest host for him this week. For all of us here at Press Row and for Public House Media, I'm Baxter Colburn. See you guys next week.